How's it going, everybody? This is Jake Gibson of the Paws Up podcast, bringing you the Paws Up post-game show. Final score of FIU football that just wrapped up. It's the Panthers falling to the New Mexico State Aggies by a score of 34-17. Um, if you'll forgive my change in voice for this post-game show, I did a lot of, let's say, negative screaming towards the end of that football game. It was not how anyone on the Pause Up podcast thought that how this game would end. Um, as I'm sure most of you, as I am checking the Facebook feed to make sure we are all good there. Um, we all predicted FIU would come out of this game winners, primarily because we thought it was going to be an offensive shootout. Both teams' defenses had not much to prove so far during their time, and we thought that despite that, it would be the Panthers' defense that would show up and impress us, right? And at least when it comes to turnovers and saving the game when the offense naturally couldn't figure it out in the fourth quarter. However, it did not go that way, as I'm still working on some stuff here on social media. This is a lot easier when you have Kevin doing most of the work for us, at least when it comes to the StreamYard, right? Of course, Kevin's finishing up some stuff, I'm assuming, for the Marlins and SI, and of course, Jonathan Mayer's figuring out things on his end with FIU men's soccer, which kudos to them, the 1-0 victory over UAB. So initial thoughts coming out of the FIU football game. Once again, FIU's offense disappoints in the second half of football. It's a trend that we saw against Louisiana Tech, Maine, UConn, and Liberty, where their offense, which made plays in the first half of football, regressed badly, I might add, and could not get things going in the second half. And unfortunately, after that Chase Gale field goal early, I believe in the third quarter, it reared its ugly head again, man. It was not a great look for FIU's offense specifically. Just to make sure I have all my things correct here. New Mexico State forced to kick for a field goal by FIU's red zone defense, which the commentators mentioned one of the best in the country when it comes to limiting touchdowns from opposing offenses who get into the red zone. So that was a 12-play drive. FIU's following drive was also 12 plays, also resulted in that Chase Gabriel field goal that I mentioned, 41 yards. So shout out to Chase, 2 for 2 in PATs, and hit that field goal. After that, it all went New Mexico State's way. They get a touchdown on their ensuing drive. It's a three-play drive. A 28-yard rush, and then a 4-yard pass, and then Pavia, the dual threat quarterback for New Mexico State, runs for 43 yards. That was just out of a commercial break. I didn't see that coming, but it happened, right? And okay, so the defense gives up an unfortunate touchdown there. At least the offense, which looks like it's matching New Mexico State's offense toe for toe, they can figure out something and get some more points on the board. It's a 5-play punt. Not to mention a sack on Jenkins, by the way. You're going to hear a lot of sacks as we continue on as to what happened. 4-play drive, another touchdown for New Mexico State. It was a 32-yard by Watkins that did most of the work, as well as a pass by Pavia. I should mention that. And then following that, FIU once again starts to get things going. A couple of nice passes to Jackson McDonald and Chris Mitchell, not to mention Eric Rivers. Actually, 3 really great pass plays from Jenkins to McDonald, Mitchell, and Rivers. They got the ball moving, and that was some actually impressive offensive performance by Jenkins. We'll go over final stats here in a second, but Ultimately, it was a wild sequence in the end zone. A pass by Jenkins tipped. Ball is in the air for like what felt like an hour. Finally landed into the hands of a New Mexico State player, and an interception in the end zone. So FIU, who was down 31-17 at this time, it was their best chance to get back into this game before it started to fell away from them, and it ended up being an interception. And we had specifically mentioned New Mexico State's defense not giving up an or not achieving an interception before this game with FIU, and lo and behold, naturally, their first interception comes against the Panthers. It's probably one of the worst times Jenkins and FIU's. Of course, you can't really blame that on Jenkins that much. That was just a great play by the defender to get his hand up in the air. But then again, it was a risky pass to throw into what looked like double, triple coverage there in the end zone. So they get their first pick of the whole season against the Panthers. If their defense can make something happen, maybe FIU can once again get back into this, and they do. They force a punt. It was actually a horrific drive for New Mexico State's offense. They force a punt, FIU's defense, and then all right, things haven't gone FIU's way on offense. Maybe Jenkins and the team can get something going here. So first play, no gain, completion to Rocky Beers. Shout out Rocky Beers. And then another interception by Jenkins. And this one, you can make the argument that there were a lot of benefactors as to why that first pass was an interception and wasn't just Jenkins' fault. You have to put a lot of the blame on Jenkins on this one. It was just not a great pass, not a great decision. And just like that, another punt for New Mexico State. Give credit to the FIU defense. Despite giving up the interceptions, they didn't let New Mexico State capitalize on them. So FIU, they're pretty much down to their final offensive drive. This is with like 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Here's how it goes: a sack, a 12-yard run to get back most of that field position. Jenkins fumbled the ball, but it was recovered by Jenkins. Or actually, was it recovered by Jenkins? I feel like it was recovered by another FIU player. I'll have to look back at that. A penalty. It was a false start on everyone but the center. And then after that, another sack. So it's 4th and 12, and out of desperation with the pocket collapsing, as it did for most of the second half, Jenkins had to run, was tackled. After a 4-yard game, 4th and 12, and they did a 4-yard run play. And turnover on downs. Mexico State gets a field goal, and it was pretty much it, right? It was the final score, 34-17. Granted, there was something like super scary that happened in the final drive for FIU as they were trying to get something going. Jenkins running, slides to the ground, but is hit in the head with like a hit in the head or neck region with the shoulder of diving New Mexico State defender. It was initially called targeting. They took away the targeting, but regardless, it was a nasty hit on Jenkins. He stayed on the ground for a while. He was helped out by the FIU medical staff. Was brought up to his feet. It looked like he could walk on his own, which is great to see. I really hope Keywan Jenkins is okay. But it was just such a horrific thing to happen to Jenkins when the game was, of course, well away from FIU, coming back and winning with like less than a minute to go or like a near a minute. And that was pretty much it. I know Carlson came in, threw a couple of passes, looked really good for the most part, except for, another sack. And at the end there, things even got a little chippy between both teams, a little bit of pushing and shoving. I'm sure some not nice words were said between FIU and New Mexico State, like, oh, nice job on your first CUSA win. It was just a horrific second half of football. It was plain, it was ugly, it was embarrassing, right? And I've never seen Coach Mike McIntyre as angry as he was throughout the entire second half, but of course, especially after the targeting call was reversed. He was furious, and I don't blame him, right? It was just a rough second half. And This was a game that we all really felt FIU should have won. They really should have won this, right? If their chances of getting into a bowl game now have slipped, I don't want to say drastically, but they've slipped a lot, considering the whole month of October was nothing short of winnable games for this Panthers team before the November slate of games in which you have to play Arkansas, uh, um, Western Kentucky, and Middle Tennessee. Though granted, Middle Tennessee has sort of struggled a bit. Regardless, it's frustrating. That was a frustrating second half of football, especially considering how deadlocked the game was coming into halftime and the first few minutes after halftime. Actually, really, most of the third quarter was also even too. The third quarter flew by immediately, like quickly. Both teams were running the ball. They were just using up the clock, and the third quarter ended in a jiffy. So I took a screenshot of the keys to the game and see what went wrong for FIU, what went right for New Mexico State. And yeah, both teams committed turnovers, but you would have thought that FIU would be the one forcing more turnovers than New Mexico State, but it was actually the other way around, which is ridiculous. I mean, let's get into some of the statistics that I feel like you should know. By the way, New Mexico State needed to pressure Jenkins, and yeah, they did 6 sacks. I believe one of those was on Carlson after Jenkins stepped out of the game. But regardless, so overall, this 439 yards for New Mexico State, 397 for FIU, 21 first downs for the Aggies, 20 for the Panthers. What else? 2 turnovers by FIU, only 1 by New Mexico State, which is I still think that's unbelievable. Okay, yeah, 4 on Jenkins. That's weird that Kevin literally just texted me correcting me about the sacks. I appreciate that, Kevin. It said 6 sacks here on the screenshot I took of the CVS broadcast, but regardless, I mean, at the end of the day, the offensive line really did not do Jenkins any favors on those final drives of the game for the Panthers, and it led to the pocket collapsing quickly. Receivers and tight ends couldn't get open. The running game at that point was already stagnant, and either Jenkins was getting sacked or he was running around for small gains, as most of New Mexico State's secondary had adjusted coming out of halftime. So this is weird. I'm looking at the ESPN statistics, and it says here that New Mexico State has a total of 7 sacks on that game. Yeah. As Kevin is mentioning, texting me, yeah, the obvious. FIU is 0-2 in Conference USA play. They lost to they're 0-3. They lost to La Tech, they lost to Liberty, and now they lost to New Mexico State. FIU is, I guess, statistically the worst team in the conference right now. Yeah, 0-3. Kevin, if you want to hop in the stream, you can hop in at any time, my guy. Doors are wide open for you. But appreciate the input there, Kevin. Though, so yeah, 0-3 in the conference. They have a 3-3 record. Is the season over? No, it absolutely is not over. They could string up a few wins here against. Your whole family is sleeping. I understand, Kevin. That's just one of the negatives about these 9 o'clock games, in my opinion. I do think there's 1 or 2. That we're going to see. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. I hope it's the end of these 9 p.m. games, though. I can't stand them, and I'm guessing you can't stand them either, Kevin. But the season is not over, right? FIU could pull up a string of wins here against, I believe, UTEP, then either Sam Houston State, then Jacksonville State. Kevin, if you can correct me on that, who FIU plays after UTEP next week, whether it's Sam Houston State, then Jacksonville State, or the other way around. But regardless, those are 3 very winnable games for FIU, and they would put them at a 6-3 record. They're getting into a bowl game, which is great. But say something like what we saw today against New Mexico State happens again, where the offense fails to perform in the second half. The defense, ultimately, because they're so fatigued, because the offense can't perform, they have to punt the ball, give the opposing team great field position, and them barely any time to breathe, then what we saw today is going to happen again against those UTEP, Sam Houston, Jacksonville State teams. Not because they're specifically the better team, but because FIU just can't figure it out. Put all the blame you want on FIU's offensive coordinator, David Yost. Put all the blame you want on head coach Mike McIntyre. Put all the blame you want on Jenkins and the offensive line, especially during the final part of the games. I'm not gonna sit here and put blame on a specific person for this game. Maybe we can do that in an upcoming, well, not really on an upcoming podcast episode. But we can talk about it at a different time. Maybe as the season wraps up, we can look back at what went wrong for this team, what went right for this team. The season could turn around, and we'll all be super positive heading into hopefully a Bahamas Bowl that we'll try to get into. Fingers crossed. But at the end of the day, wow, it's Thursday, by the way. That's crazy that we watched a football game transpire from a Wednesday to a Thursday. It was a rough day for FIU. A very winnable game turned into what was essentially a blowout in the fourth quarter. And all of a sudden, that -12 spread for this game, when it opened up, I thought that was absurd. Maybe, once again, Vegas knows the impossible. Trying to think of some positives before we close out the post-game show here, because I know I've been rambling on a bit now, and I appreciate everyone who's been watching. It's kind of turned into an event at this point, but I genuinely am frustrated, right? I mean, how could I not be frustrated? There was a lot of great we saw in that first half of football. That Kevin and I were excited to see hopefully transpire and adjust in the second half, and it just didn't happen once again. I think overall passing, Keywan Jenkins did okay. 25 for 32, 250 yards is not a bad stat line by any means, and it should be enough to win you most games, I would think. But no running back really had an amazing game today. Keyshawn Owens, 6 carries, 51 yards. Keywan Jenkins, 18 carries and 35 yards and a touchdown. Shamari Lawrence, the other touchdown. That was in the first half. We already talked about that. Receiving-wise, Chris Mitchell, 91 yards. Dean Patterson, 88 yards. Eric Rivers, 6 yards. I was kind of happy to see the tight end system they had in play, where Meeman, McDonald, and Beers all got snaps, 29 yards, 13 yards, and 5 respectively. So let me try to sum this up before we close it out. Disappointing night. What can I say? Way too many turnovers against a defense that was notoriously known for struggling in that category. The defense ultimately was fatigued and could not stop Pavia in the second half. And I can't once again, I cannot put as much blame on the defense as I would like to, because they were fatigued. You could tell they had to spend most of the second half on the field because it just did not work out for FIU's offense in the second half. Once again, it is a trend that we had all hoped was fixed coming out of New Mexico, or of the North Texas game, and it's not. So if they even want to think about making it into a bowl, if they want to think about winning the bowl, that's probably the biggest thing this team has to fix. It's for their offense to stay consistent through 60 minutes of football. And right now, that's just not happening, okay? So congratulations to New Mexico State. They played a great game overall. They get their first conference win. FIU is still searching for theirs, 0-3 in the conference. All righty then. Your final score, New Mexico State 34, FIU 17. We do have an episode of the Paws Up podcast coming out tomorrow. It is episode 34, featuring Anna Rocket, the defender of the FIU women's soccer team, who I believe is having the best start in program history. Obviously, it's not a sport we have been covering a lot these last few weeks because football has taken up a lot of our time. However, we are super happy to have a women's soccer-based episode on this week and speaking to a really cool player who we found out is a fan of the show in Anna Rocket. And obviously, I can't go into too much detail about what we have planned next week, but we want to keep the soccer trend going. Maybe switching from women's to men's next week. We might have another guest on. We'll see. We'll report it. Maybe once again in our preview show, we'll leak it a bit early. But that should be fun. And of course, next week it is Vice Night. Of course, we'll be swapping our colors to pink and blue. Here's the sneak preview right here. There you go. Yes. We're swapping to a pink and blue. FIU will be swapping to pink and blue as they don their Vice uniforms for the very first time. And, that comes back to our episode with Michael Biamonte, where we were, FIU football were super kind and let us debut the trailer alongside them at 8 o'clock that night. That was a super cool experience. And we finally get to see them, as well as some cool Lamborghinis and McLarens. It should be a fun time at the cage. I hope we can see you all there. Again, it's frustrating. An FIU loss, but still, turn out to the cage, support these Panthers. They still have a great chance at the bowl game. There's still a lot to be excited for. Of course, prayers out to Keewan Jenkins. We hope he's okay. We'll find out more from Coach McIntyre in the presser, but hopefully he's doing okay and good to go for the that game on Wednesday. So, alrighty then. Just so I can clarify everything about next week, because again, we do want you guys heading back to the cage. So it's Vice Night on Wednesday, October the 11th at 7:30 p.m. is kickoff time for FIU taking on the University of Texas El Paso Miners, who are currently have a 1-5 record and are 0-2 in the conference. I think if you look at the power rankings, FIU is in 8th and UTEP is in 9th. And like I mentioned, it's Vice Night. It should be a fun night. Yeah, man. Thank y'all for listening to me rant and vent a bit, but it's all in fun. It's all in good fun, and it's all for the love of FIU football. Want to see them improve, as do you all. So I'll close it out here. Once again, your final score: New Mexico State 34, FIU 17. I'm Jake Gibson at Jake the MC. Of course, my good friends and co-hosts Kevin Barral and Jonathan Mayer. You guys are always here in spirit, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you all. I would say tomorrow, but it's 12:45 right now, so we'll see you later today at 8 o'clock as episode 34 of the Paws Up podcast drops, featuring Anna Rocket. So until then, Paws Up.